Have you ever noticed that the more you give to others, the more you disappear from your own life? You stay kind, you stay patient, you stay silent, yet inside, something feels heavy and tired. Buddhism teaches a truth most people never hear clearly. Putting yourself first is not selfish. It is wisdom. When you abandon yourself to please everyone else, suffering begins quietly. This message is for those who feel drained, overlooked, and guilty for wanting peace. Today, you will learn the Buddha's forbidden teachings that gently teach you how to choose yourself without anger, without guilt, and without fear. 1. You are not responsible for everyone's happiness. One of the most misunderstood and emotionally draining beliefs many people carry is the idea that they must keep everyone around them happy. From a young age, we are often taught that being a good person means pleasing others, avoiding conflict, and making sure no one feels uncomfortable because of us. Over time, this belief quietly turns into a heavy burden. You begin to monitor people's moods, adjust your words carefully, and silence your own needs just to maintain harmony. Buddhism teaches that this habit is one of the hidden causes of suffering because it pulls your attention away from your own inner state and places it in the hands of others. Many people exhaust themselves trying to manage emotions that were never theirs to carry. When someone is upset, they immediately feel guilty. When someone is disappointed, they assume they have failed. When someone is unhappy, they rush to fix, explain, or sacrifice themselves to restore peace. But Buddhism reminds us of a simple and liberating truth. Every person carries their own karma, their own emotional patterns, and their own lessons to learn in this life. You did not create their inner wounds, and you cannot heal them by abandoning yourself. When you take responsibility for everyone's happiness, you slowly lose connection with your own peace. You stop listening to your body when it is tired. You ignore your heart when it needs rest. You silence your truth because you fear upsetting others. The Buddha taught that this attachment to pleasing people creates suffering because it is rooted in fear, not compassion. True compassion does not require self-destruction. It requires awareness. Putting yourself first does not mean becoming selfish or uncaring. It means understanding where your responsibility ends and where another person's inner work begins. You can be kind without fixing everyone. You can be supportive without absorbing emotional weight that is not yours. You can listen without carrying guilt. When you allow others to experience their own emotions, you give them the dignity to grow, learn, and heal in their own way. Choosing yourself means learning to remain calm and grounded even when others are not. It means understanding that someone else's disappointment does not define your worth. It means realizing that your peace is not something to be constantly traded for approval. Buddhism teaches that inner balance is precious, and protecting it is not selfish, it is wise. When you release the need to manage everyone's happiness, you return to your center. From that place of calm awareness, your kindness becomes genuine, your presence becomes lighter, and your life becomes more peaceful. 2. Detachment is not coldness, it is clarity. Many people misunderstand detachment and fear it deeply. They believe that if they detach, they will become cold, distant, or emotionally unavailable. They worry that letting go means they will stop loving, stop caring, or stop being human. Buddhism teaches something very different. Detachment is not the absence of love. It is the absence of fear, control, and emotional dependence. Detachment does not close your heart, it frees it. When you are emotionally attached, your peace becomes fragile. Your mood depends on how others treat you. Your happiness rises and falls based on their words, their attention, or their approval. You feel anxious when people change. You feel hurt when expectations are not met. Buddhism teaches that this suffering is not caused by people themselves, but by the attachment you place on them. You expect permanence in a world that is constantly changing, and this expectation creates inner tension. The Buddha taught that everything in life is impermanent. People change, feelings change, situations change. When you cling tightly to people or outcomes, you are fighting the natural flow of life. Detachment means accepting this truth without resistance. It means loving without trying to control how love should look. It means caring without needing guarantees. This clarity brings peace because you are no longer fighting reality. Detachment allows you to stay present without losing yourself. You can love someone deeply while still understanding that they are on their own journey. You can support without sacrificing your identity. You can give without emptying yourself. Buddhism teaches that when attachment is removed, love becomes purer. There is no fear of loss controlling your actions. There is no desperation to hold on. There is only presence and awareness. Putting yourself first through detachment means choosing inner stability over emotional chaos. It means stepping back when something drains your peace instead of forcing yourself to stay. It means observing situations calmly instead of reacting from fear or neediness. This does not make you uncaring, it makes you grounded. You respond thoughtfully instead of emotionally. The Buddha taught that detachment is wisdom in action. It allows you to remain steady even when life is uncertain. When you practice detachment, you stop clinging to how people should behave and start accepting how they are. This acceptance does not mean tolerance of harm, it means clarity. You know when to stay and when to step away. You know when to speak and when silence is wiser. When you detach, your relationships become lighter. There is less tension, less fear, and less emotional pressure. You no longer need constant reassurance. You no longer chase validation. Your peace comes from within, not from external approval. Buddhism teaches that this inner freedom is one of the greatest forms of self-love. Detachment is not coldness, it is emotional maturity. It is the ability to love fully without losing yourself. It is the strength to remain calm even when others are unstable. It is clarity that protects your heart while allowing it to stay open. When you learn this teaching, you stop suffering quietly and start living consciously. 3. Saying no is an act of compassion toward yourself. Many people believe that being kind means always saying yes. They say yes even when they are tired, overwhelmed, or emotionally drained. They agree to requests they do not want to fulfill. They stay in conversations that exhaust them. They accept responsibilities that quietly steal their peace. Over time, this habit creates inner tension, resentment, and emotional burnout. Buddhism teaches that true compassion must include yourself. If your kindness constantly harms you, it is no longer wisdom, it is self-neglect. From a Buddhist perspective, every action begins with intention. When you say yes out of fear, guilt, or the need to be accepted, your intention is not rooted in awareness. You are reacting, not choosing. The Buddha taught that unconscious actions lead to suffering because they disconnect you from your inner truth. Saying no, when done with clarity and calm, is an act of mindfulness. It is the moment you listen to your body, your mind, and your energy instead of ignoring them. Many people are afraid to say no because they fear disappointing others or being seen as selfish. They worry about rejection or conflict. Buddhism teaches that suffering grows when we cling to others' approval. When you constantly prioritize how others feel over how you feel, you slowly abandon yourself. This abandonment creates inner pain that eventually appears as frustration, emotional distance, or even anger. Saying no gently prevents this suffering before it grows. Putting yourself first does not mean being harsh or unkind. It means setting clear boundaries with awareness. You can say no without raising your voice, You can say no without explaining yourself endlessly. You can say no while still being respectful. The Buddha taught the middle way, a path between extremes. Saying no is not cruelty, and saying yes is not virtue. Awareness is virtue. Balance is wisdom. When you say no to what drains you, you protect your inner peace. You conserve your energy so that when you do give, it comes from fullness, not obligation. Buddhism teaches that energy is precious because it shapes your mind. When your energy is constantly scattered, your mind becomes restless. When your energy is protected, your mind becomes calm. This calm allows compassion to flow naturally. Saying no also teaches others how to treat you. When you respect your limits, you show others that your peace matters. This is not control, it is clarity. Some people may resist your boundaries because they were comfortable with your self-sacrifice. Buddhism teaches that discomfort is part of growth. Allowing others to adjust to your boundaries is not wrong. It is necessary. The Buddha reminded his followers that suffering does not come from external situations alone, but from how we relate to them. When you relate to life with awareness, you stop overgiving. You stop forcing yourself to meet expectations that drain your spirit. You begin to choose wisely where your time and energy go. This choice is self-compassion in action. Over time, saying no becomes easier. Guilt fades. Fear loosens its grip. You begin to feel lighter, calmer, and more aligned with yourself. Your yes becomes more meaningful because it is no longer automatic. It becomes intentional. Buddhism teaches that living with intention reduces suffering and brings inner peace. Saying no is not rejection of others. It is acceptance of yourself. It is the understanding that your peace is not something to be sacrificed repeatedly. When you practice this teaching, you stop living in quiet exhaustion and start living with balance, clarity, and respect for your own inner world. 4. Inner peace is more important than social approval. Many people live their lives quietly chasing approval without even realizing it. They adjust their words, soften their truth, and hide their real feelings just to be accepted. They fear being judged, misunderstood, or disliked. Buddhism teaches that this craving for approval is a subtle form of attachment, and like all attachments, it leads to suffering. When your sense of worth depends on how others see you, your peace becomes fragile and unstable. From a Buddhist perspective, social approval is impermanent. People's opinions change easily. Praise today can turn into criticism tomorrow. Acceptance can become rejection without warning. When you build your happiness on something so unstable, you live in constant inner tension. The Buddha taught that suffering arises when we rely on external conditions for inner peace. True peace must come from within, or it will never last. Many people sacrifice their authenticity to avoid conflict. They stay silent when something feels wrong. They agree even when their heart disagrees. Over time, this creates inner discomfort and self-betrayal. Buddhism teaches right speech and right action, not silent self-erasure. Speaking your truth calmly and living in alignment with your values brings far more peace than pleasing everyone around you. Putting yourself first means choosing inner harmony over external validation. It means allowing yourself to be misunderstood without rushing to explain. It means accepting that not everyone will approve of your choices, and that is okay. The Buddha taught that attachment to reputation and image binds the mind. When you release this attachment, you become lighter. You stop performing for others and start living consciously. Seeking approval often comes from fear. Fear of being alone, fear of rejection, fear of not being enough. Buddhism teaches that fear weakens when awareness grows. When you become aware of your own worth, you no longer need constant reassurance. You understand that your value does not increase with praise or decrease with criticism. This understanding brings quiet confidence and emotional stability. When inner peace becomes your priority, your decisions change. You stop chasing attention. You stop explaining yourself to those who do not listen. You stop trying to convince others to see your worth. Instead, you remain steady and grounded. This steadiness is powerful. It allows you to move through life without emotional chaos. The Buddha taught that peace is not found by controlling how others think of you, but by understanding your own mind. When your mind is calm, opinions lose their power over you. You listen without absorbing negativity. You accept feedback without losing balance. You walk away from unnecessary conflict without feeling weak. Choosing inner peace does not mean withdrawing from the world. It means engaging with the world without losing yourself. You still connect, you still care, but you no longer hand over your peace in exchange for approval. This is emotional maturity and spiritual growth. Over time, as you release the need for social approval, you feel freer. Your relationships become more honest, your actions become more intentional, your heart feels lighter. Buddhism teaches that when you stop chasing validation, life becomes simpler and more peaceful. Inner peace is not loud, it does not seek attention, it does not need applause. It is quiet, stable, and deeply fulfilling. When you choose inner peace over social approval, you choose wisdom over suffering. You choose yourself, not out of ego, but out of understanding. 5. You must sit with your pain instead of escaping it. One of the most difficult but transformative teachings in Buddhism is the understanding that pain is not the enemy, avoidance is. Many people spend their entire lives running from discomfort. When sadness appears, they distract themselves. When fear arises, they stay busy. When loneliness surfaces, they reach for noise, people, or constant activity. Buddhism teaches that this habit of escaping pain does not remove suffering. It delays healing and makes suffering deeper and more confusing. The Buddha taught that suffering begins when we resist what is already present. Pain becomes heavier when we fight it, judge it, or pretend it should not exist. When something hurts, the mind immediately wants relief. It wants distraction, reassurance, or escape. But Buddhism teaches mindful awareness, which means gently staying with what is, without panic and without judgment. This does not mean enjoying pain, it means allowing it to be seen and understood. Many people are afraid to sit with their pain because they believe it will overwhelm them. They fear that if they stop running, the emotions will become too strong. But the Buddha taught that emotions are like waves. When you stop resisting them, they rise, peak, and pass. It is resistance that keeps them stuck. When you sit quietly with discomfort, something surprising happens. The pain begins to soften. It loses its sharpness. It no longer controls you. Putting yourself first means giving yourself permission to feel without shame. It means allowing sadness to exist without calling yourself weak. It means letting grief breathe instead of pushing it away. Buddhism teaches that awareness is healing. When you observe pain calmly, you separate yourself from it. You stop becoming the pain and start witnessing it. This creates space between who you are and what you feel. Many people grow up believing they must be strong for others. They hide their emotions to avoid being a burden. Over time, this emotional suppression turns into exhaustion, numbness, or inner emptiness. The Buddha taught that ignoring suffering does not eliminate it. It simply moves it deeper into the mind. Sitting with pain brings it into the light, where it can finally dissolve. When you choose to sit with discomfort, you begin to understand its message. Pain often points to unmet needs, unresolved wounds, or truths you have been avoiding. Instead of asking how to escape pain, Buddhism invites you to ask what the pain is trying to teach. This shift changes everything. Pain becomes a teacher instead of a threat. This practice requires patience and compassion toward yourself. There is no rush. Healing does not follow a schedule. Buddhism teaches that forcing healing creates more suffering. Allowing healing creates peace. When you sit quietly with your pain, without trying to fix it immediately, you show yourself deep self-respect. You are saying, "My experience matters, and I am willing to listen." Over time, this practice builds emotional strength. You become less afraid of your inner world. You stop running from discomfort and start trusting yourself to handle it. This trust is powerful. It creates resilience that does not depend on external comfort or constant distraction. The Buddha taught that liberation comes not from avoiding suffering, but from understanding it fully. When you stop escaping your pain, you reclaim your power. You stop being controlled by fear of feeling. You begin to live with greater calm, depth, and authenticity. Sitting with pain is not weakness, it is courage. It is choosing awareness over avoidance. It is choosing healing over distraction. When you put yourself first in this way, you stop abandoning your inner world. You become present for yourself in the moments you need it most. From that presence, true peace slowly begins to grow. 6. You are allowed to outgrow people. One of the most emotionally difficult truths to accept in life is that not everyone who walks with you is meant to walk with you forever. Many people suffer quietly because they believe that letting go of someone means betrayal, coldness, or failure. Buddhism teaches something far more compassionate and freeing. Everything in life is impermanent, including relationships. Growth naturally changes who you are, and when you change, some connections no longer align with your inner world. From a Buddhist perspective, suffering often arises when we cling to what once felt familiar but no longer feels peaceful. People change, you change, values shift, awareness deepens. Yet many people stay emotionally tied to relationships that drain them because of history, obligation, or fear of being alone. The Buddha taught that clinging to the past creates suffering because it prevents you from living in the present moment. Holding on to people who no longer support your growth slowly steals your peace. Many people confuse loyalty with self-abandonment. They stay available even when they feel exhausted. They remain connected even when their inner voice is asking for distance. Buddhism teaches mindful awareness, which means listening to what your mind and heart are gently telling you. If being around someone consistently makes you feel smaller, anxious, or emotionally heavy, that is not cruelty noticing it, it is wisdom. Outgrowing someone does not mean they are bad, and it does not mean you are superior. It simply means you are walking different paths now. The Buddha taught that each being is on their own journey, shaped by their own karma and understanding. When paths diverge, forcing closeness only creates tension and suffering. Letting go with awareness allows both people to continue growing without resentment. Many people fear letting go because they worry about hurting others. They stay silent about their needs and ignore their discomfort to avoid guilt. But Buddhism teaches that suppressing truth creates deeper suffering for everyone involved. When you remain in a connection that no longer aligns with your values, your presence becomes strained. Over time, this strain turns into emotional distance, irritation, or quiet resentment. Letting go with honesty and compassion prevents this slow harm. Putting yourself first means giving yourself permission to change. It means accepting that who you were 5 years ago may no longer exist. It means understanding that growth often requires space. Buddhism does not teach attachment to people for the sake of comfort. It teaches alignment with truth. When something no longer supports your peace, awareness invites release, not guilt. Letting go does not always mean dramatic endings or confrontation. Sometimes it is gentle distance, sometimes it is fewer conversations, Sometimes it is choosing silence instead of explanation. Buddhism teaches that not all truths need to be spoken loudly. Some are honored quietly through action. Stepping back does not make you heartless. It makes you conscious. Many people remain trapped in relationships because they fear loneliness. Buddhism teaches that loneliness is not cured by surrounding yourself with the wrong people. It is healed by becoming at peace with yourself. When you learn to sit comfortably in your own presence, you no longer cling to connections out of fear. You choose relationships from fullness instead of need. This shift transforms your entire emotional world. The Buddha taught that suffering arises when we resist change. Outgrowing people is a natural part of life's unfolding. Trees shed old leaves to grow new ones. Rivers change direction over time. Growth requires release. When you allow yourself to outgrow what no longer aligns, you create space for clarity, peace, and deeper connection with yourself. Letting go with compassion also means releasing blame. You do not need to label others as wrong to justify your growth. Buddhism teaches non-judgment. You can appreciate what a relationship once gave you while acknowledging that it no longer serves your present awareness. Gratitude and release can exist together. As you practice this teaching, you may notice resistance from others. Some people are comfortable with the old version of you. They may not understand your boundaries or your silence. Buddhism teaches that misunderstanding is part of growth. You do not need permission to evolve. You are not responsible for managing how others feel about your transformation. Outgrowing people is not loss. It is alignment. It is the quiet courage to honor your inner truth, even when it is uncomfortable. When you stop forcing yourself to stay where your spirit feels heavy, you begin to feel lighter. Your energy returns, your mind becomes calmer, your heart feels more at ease. The Buddha taught that freedom comes from letting go, not holding tighter. When you allow yourself to outgrow people with awareness and compassion, you step closer to inner peace. You stop living in emotional conflict and start living in quiet alignment. This is not abandonment. It is awakening. 8. Stop explaining yourself to be understood. One of the quiet ways people abandon themselves is through constant explanation. They explain their choices, their boundaries, their feelings, and even their silence, hoping to be understood, accepted, or justified. Buddhism teaches that this habit comes from attachment to validation. When you feel the need to explain yourself endlessly, it is often because you are afraid of being judged, misunderstood, or rejected. This fear slowly steals your peace and keeps your mind restless. The Buddha taught that not everyone will understand your path, and that is not a problem. Each person sees the world through their own conditioning, experiences, and level of awareness. Expecting everyone to understand you is expecting the impossible. When you try to make others see life exactly as you do, you create unnecessary suffering for yourself. Putting yourself first means releasing the need to be constantly understood. Many people over-explain because they doubt themselves. They believe that if others agree, then their choices must be right. Buddhism teaches that true confidence does not come from agreement. It comes from inner clarity. When you are aligned with your values and aware of your intentions, you do not need approval to feel secure. Silence becomes enough. Your actions speak for you. Constant explanation drains emotional energy. You replay conversations in your mind. You worry about how you came across. You feel frustrated when people still misunderstand you despite your effort. The Buddha taught that peace comes from letting go of control, not increasing it. Trying to control how others perceive you is a subtle form of attachment. It binds your peace to their opinions. Putting yourself first means trusting your inner wisdom. It means understanding that you are allowed to make choices without defending them. You are allowed to set boundaries without justification. You are allowed to change without making everyone comfortable. Buddhism teaches that attachment to image and reputation creates suffering. When you release this attachment, your mind becomes lighter and calmer. This does not mean becoming rude or dismissive. It means choosing when explanation is necessary and when silence is wiser. The Buddha often remained silent when questions were asked from confusion rather than understanding. Silence, in Buddhism, is not avoidance. It is clarity. Sometimes explaining more only creates more misunderstanding. Knowing when to stop speaking is wisdom. Many people feel guilty when they stop explaining themselves. They worry they are being unfair or unkind. Buddhism teaches that guilt often comes from ignoring your own needs for too long. When you honor your boundaries calmly and consistently, guilt slowly fades. You realize that protecting your peace is not cruelty, it is responsibility. When you stop explaining yourself, something powerful happens. You begin to feel grounded. Your energy stays with you instead of leaking outward. Your words become intentional instead of defensive. You listen more and react less. This inner stillness changes how others interact with you. Some may resist it because they were used to your over-giving. Buddhism teaches that resistance is part of change. You do not need to fight it. Letting go of explanation also deepens self-respect. You stop seeking permission to be who you are. You accept that misunderstanding is part of life. The Buddha taught that freedom comes from non-attachment, not from perfect communication. When you are at peace with being misunderstood, you gain a level of emotional freedom that cannot be taken from you. Over time, this practice strengthens your inner voice. You become more aware of your intentions and less reactive to others' opinions. You respond instead of react. You speak when it matters and remain silent when it doesn't. This balance brings deep calm and emotional maturity. Putting yourself first through this teaching does not isolate you. It refines your relationships. Those who respect you will adapt. Those who only benefited from your explanations may drift away. Buddhism teaches that alignment naturally filters relationships. This is not loss, it is clarity. The Buddha taught that peace is not found in convincing others, but in understanding yourself. When you stop explaining yourself unnecessarily, you stop living in defense mode. You begin to live with quiet confidence and inner stability. This is not arrogance, it is self-trust. Choosing silence when appropriate is choosing peace. Choosing not to explain is choosing yourself. When you practice this teaching, you reclaim your energy, your calm, and your inner authority. From this place, your life becomes simpler, lighter, and more aligned with truth. 9. Solitude is not loneliness, it is sacred space. One of the most misunderstood experiences in life is solitude. Many people fear being alone because they confuse solitude with loneliness. They believe that being alone means something is missing, something is wrong, or something has failed. Buddhism teaches something very different. Solitude is not emptiness, it is space. And space is where clarity, healing, and wisdom are born. From a Buddhist perspective, constant social noise keeps the mind restless. When you are always surrounded by people, conversations, opinions, and expectations, you rarely hear your own inner voice. Many people stay busy not because they are fulfilled, but because they are avoiding stillness. They fear what they might feel or discover when everything becomes quiet. The Buddha taught that silence is not something to fear, it is something to enter gently and consciously. Putting yourself first often means choosing solitude, even when the world pressures you to stay connected at all times. It means allowing yourself to step back from constant interaction without feeling guilty. Buddhism teaches that awareness grows in stillness. When you remove external distractions, your inner world begins to speak. At first, this can feel uncomfortable. Thoughts become louder. Emotions surface, old wounds appear. But this is not harm, this is healing beginning. Many people surround themselves with others to feel valued. They measure their worth by how busy their social life is, how many messages they receive, or how often they are included. Buddhism teaches that this dependence on external connection creates suffering because it makes your sense of self unstable. When attention fades, insecurity rises. When solitude arrives, fear appears. The Buddha taught that true stability comes from learning to be at ease in your own presence. Solitude allows you to meet yourself honestly, without performing, without pleasing, without explaining. In solitude, there is no audience to impress and no role to play. This is where authenticity lives. When you sit alone, you begin to notice how you speak to yourself, how you treat your own thoughts, and how you respond to discomfort. Buddhism teaches that self-awareness is the foundation of liberation. Solitude creates the conditions for this awareness to grow. Choosing solitude does not mean rejecting others. It means reconnecting with yourself. It means allowing your nervous system to rest. It means giving your mind a break from constant stimulation. The Buddha often retreated into solitude to deepen his understanding. He taught that wisdom does not arise from noise, but from observation. When you slow down and sit quietly, you begin to see patterns clearly. You understand what drains you and what nourishes you. Many people fear solitude because they associate it with abandonment or rejection. Buddhism teaches that suffering often comes from old conditioning. If solitude once felt painful, the mind assumes it will always be painful. But awareness changes experience. When solitude is chosen consciously, it becomes nourishing instead of empty. It becomes a place of restoration instead of loss. Putting yourself first means honoring your need for space without apologizing. It means understanding that rest is not laziness. Silence is not avoidance. Distance is not cruelty. Buddhism teaches the middle way, balance between extremes. Too much isolation can create disconnection, but too little solitude creates exhaustion. Wisdom is knowing when to step back and recharge. In solitude, emotional clarity grows. You begin to process experiences instead of carrying them unconsciously. You reflect instead of react. You release emotions instead of suppressing them. The Buddha taught that unexamined experiences create suffering. Solitude gives you the time and space to examine gently, without pressure. Many people notice that after spending time alone, they return to relationships more present and grounded. This is because solitude refills what constant interaction depletes. When you are connected to yourself, you stop expecting others to fill emotional gaps. Buddhism teaches that craving connection to escape emptiness creates suffering. When you learn to sit peacefully with yourself, relationships become lighter and healthier. Solitude also strengthens intuition. When external voices quiet down, your inner guidance becomes clearer. You start trusting your feelings. You sense when something is right or wrong without needing validation. This inner trust is a form of self-love. Buddhism teaches that wisdom is already within you, but it cannot be heard through noise and distraction. Many people feel guilty choosing solitude because they worry about being misunderstood. They fear others will think they are distant, cold, or arrogant. Buddhism teaches that misunderstanding is part of the human experience. You do not need to explain your need for space to everyone. Your peace does not require permission. Over time, solitude becomes a source of strength. You stop fearing being alone. You stop filling silence with unnecessary noise. You become comfortable sitting with your thoughts without judgment. This comfort creates emotional independence. You no longer cling to people out of fear. You choose connection out of presence. The Buddha taught that liberation comes from knowing yourself deeply. Solitude is one of the most direct paths to this knowing. When you stop running from yourself, you stop suffering in silence. You begin to feel whole, even when alone. Choosing solitude is choosing self-respect. It is choosing healing over distraction. It is choosing depth over surface connection. When you allow yourself sacred space, you return to the world calmer, clearer, and more grounded. Solitude is not loneliness. It is where you remember who you are without the noise of expectations. It is where your mind settles, your heart softens, and your awareness expands. When you put yourself first by honoring solitude, you stop seeking completion outside yourself. You realize you were never incomplete. 10. Trust yourself even when no one agrees with you. One of the deepest sources of suffering in human life is self-doubt. Many people do not struggle because they lack intelligence, strength, or ability. They struggle because they do not trust themselves. They constantly look outward for confirmation. They wait for permission. They hesitate until someone else agrees. Buddhism teaches that this habit slowly disconnects you from your inner wisdom and makes your life fragile, because your direction depends on voices that are not your own. From a Buddhist perspective, every human being carries an inner knowing. This knowing is not loud. It does not argue. It does not rush. It speaks quietly through feelings of alignment, discomfort, clarity, and unease. When you ignore this inner guidance repeatedly, confusion grows. You start living someone else's version of life. You begin to feel lost, even when everything looks fine on the surface. The Buddha taught that ignorance is not the absence of information, but the absence of awareness. When you stop listening to yourself, you move away from awareness. Many people fear trusting themselves because they are afraid of making mistakes. They believe that if they choose wrongly, everything will fall apart. Buddhism teaches that mistakes are not failures. They are teachers. Growth does not come from perfect decisions. It comes from conscious experience. When you avoid choosing out of fear, you remain stuck. When you choose with awareness, even imperfect choices become lessons that deepen wisdom. Putting yourself first means honoring your inner voice, even when it is uncomfortable. Sometimes your inner knowing will guide you away from paths others expect you to follow. It may ask you to slow down when others push you to hurry. It may ask you to walk alone when others want you to stay. Buddhism teaches that the path of awakening is often solitary, not because others are wrong, but because awareness unfolds differently for each person. Many people betray themselves by staying silent about what they feel. They suppress their instincts to avoid conflict or rejection. Over time, this suppression creates inner tension and regret. The Buddha taught that suffering grows when truth is ignored. This does not mean speaking harshly or impulsively. It means being honest with yourself first. When you trust your inner truth, your actions become more aligned, even if your words remain gentle and few. Trusting yourself does not mean believing you are always right. It means believing you are capable of learning. Buddhism teaches humility, not self-doubt. There is a difference. Humility allows growth. Self-doubt freezes it. When you trust yourself, you move forward with openness instead of fear. You remain flexible instead of rigid. You adjust without abandoning your direction. Many people seek advice constantly because they are afraid of responsibility. They want someone else to carry the weight of decision-making. Buddhism teaches personal responsibility through awareness. No one else can live your consequences for you. No one else can feel your alignment or misalignment. Guidance can be helpful, but when advice replaces inner listening, confusion increases. Trusting yourself means hearing advice, reflecting quietly, and then choosing what feels truthful to your inner state. Putting yourself first means accepting that disagreement is part of life. Not everyone will support your choices. Not everyone will understand your direction. Buddhism teaches non-attachment to opinions. When you attach to agreement, you give others power over your path. When you release this attachment, you move freely. You stop explaining yourself endlessly. You stop shrinking your truth to fit into someone else's comfort. Trusting yourself also requires patience. Inner clarity does not always arrive instantly. Sometimes it unfolds slowly. Buddhism teaches mindful waiting, not forced action. Trust does not mean rushing. It means staying present until understanding becomes clear. This patience builds confidence because you learn to sit with uncertainty without panic. Many people feel guilt when they choose themselves. They worry they are being selfish, disloyal, or wrong. Buddhism teaches that guilt often arises from conditioning, not truth. Choosing yourself does not mean harming others. It means not harming yourself. When you repeatedly ignore your inner guidance, you create internal harm that eventually affects everything around you. Trusting yourself brings balance, not selfishness. As you practice trusting yourself, something changes. You become calmer. Decision-making becomes simpler. You stop overthinking every choice. You accept responsibility without fear. The Buddha taught that freedom arises when the mind is no longer divided against itself. When your thoughts, feelings, and actions align, suffering decreases. Trusting yourself also strengthens resilience. When challenges arise, you do not collapse into doubt. You adjust, reflect, and continue. You stop blaming others for your path. You stop waiting to be saved. Buddhism teaches self-reliance through awareness, not isolation. You stand on your own inner ground while remaining connected to life. Over time, self-trust creates quiet confidence. You no longer need to prove yourself. You no longer seek constant reassurance. You become comfortable standing alone when necessary. This does not harden your heart. It softens it, because when you trust yourself, you no longer compete, compare, or defend. You simply live. The Buddha taught that awakening begins when you stop outsourcing your wisdom, when you stop running from your own knowing, when you stop doubting the voice that has been guiding you quietly all along. Trusting yourself is not arrogance, it is remembrance. Choosing yourself through self-trust means honoring your inner compass even when the road is unclear. It means walking forward gently, aware that clarity grows through movement. It means understanding that your life is yours to live, not to justify. When you trust yourself, peace follows naturally. You stop fighting your own nature. You stop living in hesitation. You become rooted in awareness. This is not loud confidence. It is silent certainty. The Buddha taught that liberation is not found by following others blindly, but by seeing clearly for yourself. When you trust yourself, you return to that clarity. You stop abandoning your inner world. You begin living in alignment with truth. This is the deepest form of self-love, not indulgence, not ego, but trust, quiet, steady, unshakable trust in your own awareness. 11. Forgive yourself, or you will keep reliving the same pain. One of the quietest but most powerful sources of suffering is the pain we carry toward ourselves. Many people believe they have moved on from their past, yet inside they continue to punish themselves silently. They replay mistakes in their mind. They judge their old choices harshly. They carry shame for who they once were, for what they allowed, or for what they failed to do. Buddhism teaches that holding on to self-blame is a form of attachment, and like all attachments, it keeps suffering alive. From a Buddhist perspective, the past no longer exists except in memory, yet many people live as if it is still happening. They measure their worth through old failures. They define themselves by moments of weakness. They treat themselves as if they must pay forever for one chapter of their life. The Buddha taught that clinging to the past creates suffering because it traps the mind in what cannot be changed instead of what can be understood. Many people forgive others more easily than they forgive themselves. They show compassion to strangers, yet speak to themselves with cruelty. They call themselves foolish, weak, or broken for not knowing better back then. Buddhism teaches that awareness grows over time. You could not have acted with today's wisdom in yesterday's circumstances. Judging your past self with your present awareness is not truth, it is ignorance of growth. Putting yourself first means ending the inner punishment. It means recognizing that every mistake carried a lesson. Every painful choice revealed something about your needs, fears, or unhealed wounds. The Buddha taught that suffering has meaning when it is understood. When you refuse to forgive yourself, you refuse to extract wisdom from pain. You keep the wound open instead of allowing it to heal. Self-forgiveness does not mean denying responsibility. Buddhism never teaches avoidance. It teaches understanding. You acknowledge where you acted unconsciously. You recognize where harm was caused, whether to yourself or others. But instead of drowning in guilt, you choose awareness. You learn, you grow, you move forward with intention. This is wisdom in action. Many people remain stuck because they believe forgiveness must be earned through punishment. They think suffering longer will somehow balance the past. Buddhism teaches that suffering does not cleanse guilt. Awareness does. Continuing to hurt yourself does not honor the lesson. Integrating the lesson does. When you carry unresolved self-blame, it shapes your present life. You may sabotage good things because you feel undeserving. You may stay in pain because comfort feels unfamiliar. You may avoid joy because part of you believes you do not deserve peace. Buddhism teaches that liberation cannot arise in a mind that is constantly at war with itself. Forgiving yourself means allowing yourself to be human. It means understanding that ignorance is part of learning. The Buddha taught that all beings act from their level of awareness. When awareness is limited, suffering follows. When awareness expands, compassion becomes possible. This compassion must include yourself, or it remains incomplete. Many people fear self-forgiveness because they think it will make them careless. They believe that if they stop judging themselves, they will repeat the same mistakes. Buddhism teaches the opposite. When you forgive with awareness, you become more conscious, not less. Harsh self-judgment clouds the mind. Gentle awareness sharpens it. Putting yourself first through self-forgiveness means releasing the identity of who you were. You stop introducing yourself to life through old wounds. You stop defining your future by past pain. You allow yourself to evolve without dragging guilt behind you. Buddhism teaches impermanence. You are not who you were. Holding on to that identity is clinging, not honesty. Self-forgiveness also softens your relationships. When you stop judging yourself harshly, you stop projecting judgment onto others. You become more patient, more understanding, less reactive. The Buddha taught that inner peace radiates outward naturally. When the inner war ends, the outer world feels less hostile. Many people carry shame in silence. They never speak it. They never look at it. They hope time will erase it. Buddhism teaches that unexamined pain does not disappear, it hides. Sitting with shame gently, without self-hatred, allows it to dissolve. Awareness turns poison into medicine. Forgiving yourself does not require dramatic rituals. It begins with how you speak to yourself daily. It begins with noticing when the mind replays old scenes and choosing not to follow them. It begins with saying quietly, "I did the best I could with what I knew at that time." Buddhism teaches that kindness toward the mind creates clarity. As you practice self-forgiveness, you may feel resistance. Old guilt may resurface. This does not mean you are failing. It means healing is happening. The Buddha taught that when awareness touches suffering, discomfort may arise before peace settles in. Stay present, do not rush. Healing unfolds at its own pace. Over time, self-forgiveness creates lightness. You stop carrying invisible weight. You feel more present in your body. Your breath becomes deeper. Your mind becomes quieter. You begin to experience moments of peace without immediately questioning them. This is a sign that the inner war is ending. Forgiving yourself also restores trust in yourself. When you stop punishing yourself for the past, you allow confidence to grow. You stop second-guessing every move. You act with more clarity. Buddhism teaches that freedom arises when the mind is no longer trapped in regret or fear. The Buddha taught that liberation is not about becoming perfect. It is about seeing clearly. Seeing clearly includes seeing your past with compassion instead of judgment. When you forgive yourself, you stop reliving pain and start learning from it. This transforms suffering into wisdom. Choosing yourself through self-forgiveness means allowing peace to enter where punishment once lived. It means accepting that growth is messy, slow, and deeply human. It means understanding that you do not need to suffer forever to prove that you have learned. When you forgive yourself, you close the chapter that no longer needs to be read again. You do not erase the past. You release its power over the present. Buddhism teaches that freedom begins when attachment ends. Letting go of self-blame is one of the most powerful forms of letting go. This is not weakness. It is courage. It is the courage to stop hurting yourself for something that already taught you what it needed to teach. It is the courage to live forward instead of backward. Forgive yourself, not because the past was acceptable, but because you deserve peace now. This is not indulgence. It is awakening. 12. Stop abandoning yourself to be loved. One of the most painful patterns many people live with is self-abandonment. It often begins quietly and feels almost invisible. You ignore your needs to avoid conflict. You silence your feelings to keep peace. You stay where you feel drained because leaving feels selfish. Over time, you become very good at being there for everyone except yourself. Buddhism teaches that this pattern is one of the deepest roots of suffering, because when you abandon yourself, no amount of external love can ever feel enough. From a Buddhist perspective, suffering grows when we disconnect from awareness. Self-abandonment is a form of unconsciousness. You stop listening to your inner signals. You override discomfort. You tell yourself that your feelings do not matter as much as keeping others comfortable. The Buddha taught that ignoring truth does not remove it. It simply turns inward and becomes pain. Many people abandon themselves because they believe love must be earned through sacrifice. They learn early that being agreeable brings acceptance, while being honest brings rejection. Over time, they associate love with self-denial. Buddhism teaches that this belief is rooted in fear, not wisdom. Love that requires you to disappear is not love. It is attachment mixed with insecurity. Putting yourself first means recognizing when you are betraying your own needs. It means noticing when your body is tense, your mind is exhausted, and your heart feels heavy, and choosing not to ignore those signals. The Buddha taught that the body and mind are messengers of truth. When you stop listening to them, you drift away from yourself. Self-abandonment often shows up in small moments. You say yes when you want to say no. You stay silent when something hurts. You tolerate disrespect to avoid discomfort. Each small moment may seem harmless, but over time they accumulate. Buddhism teaches that suffering is often created through repetition. Repeated self-neglect becomes a way of life. Many people believe that choosing themselves will make them unlovable. They fear that boundaries will push others away. Buddhism teaches that fear of loss keeps people trapped in suffering. When you abandon yourself to keep others close, you lose the most important relationship of all, the one with yourself. Without this inner relationship, external connections become unstable and draining. Putting yourself first does not mean demanding attention or controlling others. It means staying connected to your inner truth, even when it is inconvenient. It means honoring your limits without apology. It means allowing discomfort instead of erasing yourself. The Buddha taught that awareness is courage. Facing your own truth requires more strength than pleasing others. Many people do not realize how deeply self-abandonment affects their life. It shapes their relationships, their career choices, and their emotional health. They feel unseen, yet they never show themselves fully. They feel unfulfilled, yet they never allow space for their own needs. Buddhism teaches that fulfillment does not come from being needed. It comes from being aligned. Ending self-abandonment requires gentleness. You do not wake up one day and suddenly choose yourself perfectly. Buddhism teaches gradual awakening. You begin by noticing. You notice when resentment appears. You notice when exhaustion follows giving. You notice when silence feels heavy instead of peaceful. Awareness is the first step toward change. When you stop abandoning yourself, guilt often appears. You may feel selfish for prioritizing your needs. Buddhism teaches that guilt often comes from conditioning, not truth. You were taught to value others over yourself, not because it was wise, but because it was convenient for the world around you. Choosing yourself may feel uncomfortable at first, but discomfort does not mean you are wrong. It means you are changing. Staying loyal to yourself means honoring your inner experience even when no one else sees it. It means believing your feelings are valid even without external confirmation. The Buddha taught that truth does not require witnesses. Awareness itself is enough. When you trust your inner signals, you stop gaslighting yourself into staying small. Many people abandon themselves because they fear being alone. Buddhism teaches that loneliness is not cured by self-betrayal. It is healed by self-connection. When you learn to stay with yourself emotionally, you no longer cling to others out of fear. You choose relationships from clarity, not desperation. This transforms the quality of your connections. Putting yourself first also means allowing yourself to change. You are not required to stay loyal to versions of yourself that were created to survive. The Buddha taught impermanence. Growth naturally alters your needs and boundaries. When you cling to old patterns to keep others comfortable, you resist life itself. Ending self-abandonment also brings emotional honesty. You stop pretending everything is fine when it is not. You stop smiling through discomfort. Buddhism teaches that authenticity reduces suffering. When your inner world and outer actions align, tension dissolves. You feel calmer, even when life is challenging. As you practice staying loyal to yourself, some people may resist. They were comfortable with your self-sacrifice. Buddhism teaches that resistance is part of transformation. You are not responsible for maintaining dynamics that harm you. Growth often disrupts familiar patterns. This is not cruelty, it is clarity. When you stop abandoning yourself, your energy changes. You feel more grounded. Your words become fewer but more truthful. Your presence becomes calmer. You no longer chase connection. You allow it to meet you naturally. The Buddha taught that when attachment loosens, peace follows. Self-loyalty is not arrogance. It is responsibility. You are the only person who will live your entire life with you. Abandoning yourself creates lifelong suffering. Staying with yourself creates inner stability that nothing external can replace. Putting yourself first through self-loyalty means choosing to stand with yourself in every season, even when you are confused, tired, or imperfect. It means refusing to disappear to be accepted. It means understanding that real love does not require self-erasure. The Buddha taught that liberation begins when the mind stops running away from itself. When you stop abandoning yourself, you return home inwardly. From that place, love becomes natural, boundaries become clear, and peace becomes possible. This is not a dramatic act. It is a quiet decision made again and again, a decision to stay, a decision to listen, a decision to honor your inner truth. Stop abandoning yourself to be loved. Love begins when you finally stay. 13. Stop betraying your inner truth to keep the peace. One of the most silent and destructive habits many people live with is the betrayal of their own inner truth. It happens quietly, without drama, and often without awareness. You feel something is wrong, but you stay silent. You sense a boundary being crossed, but you smile instead. You know a situation no longer aligns with you, but you remain because leaving feels uncomfortable. Buddhism teaches that this repeated inner betrayal is one of the deepest causes of long-term suffering, because peace built on self-silencing is not peace, it is suppression. From a Buddhist perspective, truth is not something you argue for, it is something you live in alignment with. Your inner truth shows itself through discomfort, tension, exhaustion, resentment, and emotional heaviness. These are not weaknesses, they are signals. When you ignore them to keep external peace, you create internal conflict. The Buddha taught that suffering arises when the mind is divided against itself. Every time you silence your truth to avoid discomfort, that division grows. Many people betray their inner truth because they fear disruption. They fear disappointing others. They fear being seen as difficult, selfish, or ungrateful. Over time, they learn to prioritize harmony over honesty. Buddhism teaches that harmony without awareness is fragile. It requires constant self-suppression. It demands that you disappear in small ways again and again. This is not the middle way. This is imbalance. Putting yourself first means recognizing when peace is being maintained at the cost of your well-being. It means noticing when your body feels tight during conversations, when your mind replays moments you did not speak up, and when your heart feels heavy after agreeing to something you did not want. The Buddha taught mindfulness of the body and mind because they reveal truth before words do. When you stop listening to these signals, suffering becomes chronic. Inner truth does not always demand confrontation. Buddhism does not teach aggression, it teaches clarity. Living in truth may sometimes mean speaking gently. Sometimes it means stepping back quietly. Sometimes it means choosing distance instead of argument. But it always means not lying to yourself about what you feel. The deepest betrayal is not speaking harshly. It is pretending you are fine when you are not. Many people believe that being truthful will create chaos. They imagine conflict, rejection, or loss. Buddhism teaches that avoiding truth does not prevent pain, it delays it. Suppressed truth eventually surfaces as resentment, emotional numbness, or physical exhaustion. When truth is denied expression, it seeks another form. Living in alignment prevents this slow internal decay. Betraying your inner truth often begins early in life. You learn that honesty brings consequences, while silence brings acceptance. Over time, this conditioning becomes automatic. You no longer ask what you feel, you ask what is expected. Buddhism teaches that awakening requires deconditioning. It requires gently questioning the habits that keep you disconnected from yourself. Putting yourself first means allowing yourself to feel what you feel without immediately invalidating it. It means not rushing to justify others' behavior while dismissing your own experience. The Buddha taught non-judgment, and that includes non-judgment toward yourself. Your feelings are not accusations, they are information. When you honor them, clarity emerges. Living in alignment with your inner truth does not mean becoming rigid or self-centered. Buddhism teaches flexibility rooted in awareness. You can be open to dialogue without erasing yourself. You can compromise without self-betrayal. The difference lies in intention. Are you choosing consciously, or are you abandoning yourself to keep the peace? Many people stay in misaligned situations because they confuse endurance with strength. They believe that tolerating discomfort makes them noble. Buddhism teaches that unnecessary suffering is not virtue. Wisdom lies in recognizing when endurance becomes self-harm. Staying silent while your spirit feels crushed is not compassion, it is fear wearing a calm mask. When you begin to honor your inner truth, discomfort may arise, guilt may appear, anxiety may surface. Buddhism teaches that these emotions are not signs of wrongdoing, they are signs of growth. When old patterns dissolve, the mind resists. Stay present, do not retreat. Awareness stabilizes what fear exaggerates. Living truthfully also changes your relationships. Some connections deepen because honesty creates real intimacy. Others fade because they depended on your silence. Buddhism teaches impermanence. Not all relationships are meant to survive your awakening. This is not loss, it is alignment unfolding. As you stop betraying your inner truth, your energy returns. You feel less drained. Your words become simpler. You no longer rehearse conversations endlessly. You no longer carry the weight of unspoken feelings. The Buddha taught that simplicity is a sign of clarity. When the inner conflict ends, life becomes lighter. Inner truth does not demand perfection. You will still hesitate at times. You will still choose comfort occasionally. Buddhism teaches compassion toward the process. Awakening is gradual. What matters is honesty with yourself, not flawless expression. Putting yourself first through truth means trusting that your inner experience matters. It means choosing authenticity over performance. It means allowing temporary discomfort in exchange for long-term peace. The Buddha taught that liberation requires courage, not force. Courage to see clearly, courage to stop pretending. When you live aligned with your inner truth, you stop living defensively. You stop explaining yourself excessively. You stop fearing others' reactions. You become steady, not because life is easy, but because you are no longer at war with yourself. This is not rebellion, it is responsibility. Responsibility to your own awareness. Responsibility to the life you are living from the inside. The Buddha taught that peace is not found by avoiding truth, but by resting in it. When you stop betraying your inner truth to keep the peace, you discover that real peace was never outside you. It was waiting for your honesty. Choose truth over comfort. Choose alignment over approval. Choose yourself, quietly, consistently, and without guilt. This is not selfishness. This is awakening. 14. Stop rushing your healing and trust your own timing. One of the most subtle ways people create suffering for themselves is by rushing their own growth. They feel behind. They compare their journey to others. They pressure themselves to heal faster, be stronger sooner, and move on more quickly. Buddhism teaches that this inner urgency is not motivation, it is resistance to the present moment. When you rush your healing, you are quietly telling yourself that who you are right now is not acceptable. From a Buddhist perspective, all things unfold according to causes and conditions. A seed does not become a tree because it is impatient. It becomes a tree because it is given time, care, and the right environment. Healing works the same way. Pain that developed over years cannot dissolve overnight. The Buddha taught patience not as passivity, but as deep understanding of how life actually moves. Many people believe they must fix themselves to be worthy of peace. They treat healing like a race. They judge themselves for still feeling pain, still grieving, still struggling. Buddhism teaches that this self-judgment adds a second layer of suffering on top of the first. Pain is difficult enough without turning it into proof of failure. When you rush yourself, you turn healing into another form of pressure. Putting yourself first means allowing your process to be slow without calling yourself weak. It means understanding that healing is not linear. Some days you feel clarity, other days old emotions resurface. Buddhism teaches that impermanence applies to emotional states as well. Progress is not a straight line, it is a spiral. You may revisit the same feelings, but each time with deeper awareness. Many people rush because they are uncomfortable being where they are. They want relief, they want certainty, they want to feel done with pain. The Buddha taught that craving an outcome creates suffering. When you fixate on how you should feel in the future, you disconnect from what you are feeling now. Healing happens in presence, not impatience. Rushing often comes from comparison. You see others who seem calmer, happier, or more successful, and you assume you are behind. Buddhism teaches that comparison is a form of ignorance because it ignores unseen struggles. You only see fragments of others' lives, never the full picture. Measuring your journey against theirs creates unnecessary suffering and steals your focus from your own path. Trusting your timing means accepting that your nervous system, your mind, and your heart all heal at different speeds. You may understand something mentally long before your emotions catch up. This does not mean you are failing. It means integration takes time. The Buddha taught that wisdom must sink from the head into the heart. This cannot be forced. Many people rush healing because they fear being stuck forever. Buddhism teaches that nothing remains the same indefinitely. Change is inevitable, but forcing change often creates resistance. When you allow yourself to be exactly where you are without judgment, change happens more naturally. Stillness invites movement. Pressure creates paralysis. Putting yourself first also means resting when you need to rest. Many people think rest is laziness. Buddhism teaches that rest is essential for clarity. When the mind is exhausted, insight cannot arise. Allowing yourself to pause without guilt is an act of wisdom. You are not falling behind. You are allowing integration. Rushing healing often leads to spiritual bypassing. People use positivity, forgiveness, or spiritual language to avoid feeling pain fully. Buddhism does not teach avoidance. It teaches direct awareness. Skipping emotional steps does not lead to freedom. It leads to unresolved tension that resurfaces later. Trusting your timing means allowing yourself to feel what needs to be felt in the order it arises. When you stop rushing, you begin to notice subtle changes. You respond instead of react. You breathe more deeply. You become less harsh with yourself. These are signs of healing, even if your life circumstances have not dramatically changed. Buddhism teaches that inner shifts matter more than external milestones. Many people believe that once they heal, they will finally deserve peace. Buddhism teaches that peace is not a reward for finishing healing. Peace is something you practice during healing. You do not wait to be whole to treat yourself gently. You practice gentleness so wholeness can emerge. Trusting your timing also means letting go of rigid expectations. You may not heal in the way you imagined. Your path may look different. Buddhism teaches flexibility rooted in awareness. Clinging to a specific vision of how healing should look creates frustration. Allowing the process to unfold brings ease. When you rush yourself, you often ignore small victories. You overlook moments of courage, clarity, and self-respect because they do not look dramatic enough. Buddhism teaches mindfulness of the small. Transformation often happens quietly. Recognizing subtle progress builds patience and self-trust. Putting yourself first means choosing compassion over criticism. When pain lingers, instead of asking, "What's wrong with me?" you ask, "What does this need?" This shift changes everything. Healing accelerates when it feels safe, not when it is pressured. The Buddha taught that the present moment is the only place liberation can occur. If you are always rushing toward a future version of yourself, you miss the opportunity to meet yourself now. And meeting yourself now is where healing begins. Trusting your timing does not mean giving up on growth. It means growing without violence toward yourself. It means allowing life to move through you at its own rhythm. This rhythm is wiser than fear. As you stop rushing, you develop patience not only with yourself, but with others. You become less reactive, less judgmental, and more grounded. Inner patience ripples outward. The Buddha taught that peace cultivated within naturally affects the world around you. Healing is not something you complete, it is something you learn to live with consciously. Some wounds soften. Some transform. Some teach you how to love more deeply. Rushing denies these lessons. Presence reveals them. Putting yourself first through patience means choosing to walk with yourself instead of dragging yourself forward. It means understanding that you are not late. You are exactly where your awareness currently allows you to be. The Buddha taught that haste is rooted in fear, while patience is rooted in trust. When you trust your own timing, fear loosens its grip. You stop fighting your life and start living it. Slow down, breathe, stay. You are not behind. You are becoming. 15. Learn to stand alone without becoming bitter. One of the final and most difficult stages of inner growth is learning how to stand alone without closing your heart. Many people can become independent, but they do it through anger, withdrawal, or emotional walls. Buddhism teaches a different kind of independence. It is not built on resentment or pride. It is built on clarity, self-respect, and deep inner stability. Standing alone does not mean rejecting others. It means no longer needing others to complete you. Many people fear standing alone because they associate it with abandonment. They believe that if they stop depending on others emotionally, they will become cold or isolated. Buddhism teaches that emotional dependence is not love. It is attachment mixed with fear. When you depend on others to feel safe, valued, or whole, you give them power over your inner world. This power imbalance creates anxiety, disappointment, and quiet suffering. Standing alone begins when you stop outsourcing your sense of worth. You no longer wait for validation to feel real. You no longer need constant reassurance to feel secure. The Buddha taught that anything you rely on externally for inner peace will eventually fail you, because all external things are impermanent. People change, circumstances shift, attention fades. When your stability depends on these things, suffering becomes inevitable. Putting yourself first means learning to sit with yourself emotionally without running away. It means being present with your thoughts without immediately seeking distraction. It means allowing silence without filling it with noise. Buddhism teaches that when the mind is no longer clinging outward, it naturally settles inward. This inward settling is not loneliness. It is grounding. Many people who learn to stand alone do so after being hurt. They close off emotionally to protect themselves. While this may feel strong, Buddhism teaches that bitterness is another form of attachment. It keeps the past alive. True independence does not come from hardening the heart. It comes from softening it, while no longer giving it away unconsciously. Standing alone without bitterness means accepting what has happened without letting it define you. It means understanding that pain was part of your learning, not proof that love is unsafe. The Buddha taught that suffering becomes wisdom only when it is met with awareness. Otherwise, it becomes identity. When you carry bitterness, You carry the past with you into the present. Many people remain emotionally dependent because they fear facing themselves. When relationships end or distance appears, discomfort surfaces. Old insecurities rise. Buddhism teaches that this discomfort is not something to escape, it is something to understand. Standing alone gives you the opportunity to meet parts of yourself that were previously hidden behind relationships. Putting yourself first means learning to provide internally what you once demanded externally. Safety becomes something you cultivate within. Validation becomes something you give yourself through awareness and integrity. Comfort becomes something you create through presence instead of distraction. The Buddha taught that self-reliance is not isolation, it is maturity. Standing alone also changes how you relate to others. When you no longer need others to fill emotional gaps, your relationships become lighter. You connect from choice, not fear. You stay because you want to, not because you are afraid to be alone. Buddhism teaches that non-attachment deepens connection rather than destroying it. When you are not clinging, love becomes freer. Many people confuse standing alone with superiority. They withdraw and believe they are above others. Buddhism teaches humility. Standing alone does not mean rejecting support or denying connection. It means knowing that your peace does not collapse when support is absent. You can accept help without becoming dependent on it. There will be moments when standing alone feels uncomfortable. Silence may feel unfamiliar. Stillness may feel unsettling. Buddhism teaches that discomfort is often the doorway to awareness. When you do not run from discomfort, it softens. It teaches you resilience. Over time, what once felt empty begins to feel spacious. Standing alone also means being honest about your needs without demanding that others fulfill them. You stop expecting people to rescue you from your emotions. You stop blaming others for how you feel. This responsibility brings freedom. The Buddha taught that freedom arises when you stop seeking control and start cultivating understanding. Bitterness often arises when expectations go unmet. When you expect others to behave a certain way, disappointment follows. Standing alone without bitterness means releasing these expectations. You allow people to be who they are without needing them to be your source of stability. This release brings peace. As you practice standing alone, you may notice that some relationships fall away naturally. They were built on dependency, not alignment. Buddhism teaches impermanence. Letting go is not failure. It is clarity. What remains after this clarity is more authentic and less draining. Standing alone also strengthens inner confidence. You trust your decisions more. You fear rejection less. You stop compromising your values to avoid loneliness. The Buddha taught that fear weakens when attachment loosens. When you are not afraid of being alone, you are no longer controlled by it. Putting yourself first through inner independence does not mean choosing solitude forever. It means choosing connection wisely. You learn the difference between companionship and dependence. You learn when closeness nourishes you and when it drains you. This discernment is wisdom. Standing alone without bitterness also heals old wounds. You stop replaying stories of betrayal. You stop defining yourself through what others failed to give you. Buddhism teaches that clinging to pain keeps it alive. Releasing bitterness allows healing to complete its work. Over time, standing alone begins to feel peaceful. You enjoy your own presence. You feel complete without constant stimulation. You no longer chase connection out of emptiness. This wholeness is not arrogance, it is balance. The Buddha taught that liberation comes when the mind is no longer dependent on conditions. Standing alone is part of this liberation. You remain open to life without being controlled by it. You love without clinging. You walk without leaning. Standing alone does not mean you will never feel pain again. It means pain no longer defines you. It means disappointment no longer destroys your balance. It means you can experience loss without losing yourself. Putting yourself first through this teaching means choosing inner strength over emotional dependence. It means standing on your own awareness without closing your heart. It means becoming whole within yourself so that connection becomes a gift, not a need. This is not isolation. This is freedom. Stand alone, not in bitterness but in clarity, not in fear but in trust, not to reject the world but to meet it without losing yourself. This is one of the final steps of awakening. What you have just listened to is not a list of rules. It is not a method to become cold, distant, or self-centered. These teachings are reminders of something you already knew deep inside, but may have forgotten while trying to survive, please, and belong. Buddhism never taught you to abandon the world. It taught you to stop abandoning yourself inside the world. Every lesson you explored points to one simple truth. Suffering does not begin when others disappoint you. It begins when you repeatedly ignore your own inner truth to keep peace, gain approval, or avoid discomfort. Each time you silence yourself, rush your healing, betray your needs, or depend on others for stability, you drift further from your center. And when you live far from your center, life feels heavy, confusing, and exhausting. Putting yourself first is not selfishness, it is responsibility. Responsibility to your awareness, responsibility to your inner life, responsibility to the only mind you will live with for your entire existence. The Buddha taught that peace is not something you earn later after fixing yourself. Peace is something you practice now by staying present, honest, and compassionate with yourself. When you stop explaining yourself unnecessarily, your mind grows quieter. When you stop rushing your healing, your nervous system softens. When you stop abandoning yourself to be loved, your heart feels safer. When you learn to stand alone without bitterness, your confidence becomes unshakable. These are not dramatic changes, they are subtle shifts. But subtle shifts are how deep transformation happens. You may notice that as you choose yourself more consistently, some things fall away. Certain relationships may change. Some people may not understand you anymore. This is not punishment. This is alignment. Buddhism teaches impermanence not to make you fearful, but to make you free. What is meant to stay will stay without you shrinking yourself. What requires your self-betrayal was never meant to remain. Choosing yourself does not mean you stop loving others. It means you stop using love as a way to escape yourself. When you are anchored within, your kindness becomes genuine instead of exhausting. Your presence becomes calm instead of anxious. Your silence becomes peaceful instead of heavy. This is the difference between attachment and compassion. You will still feel emotions. You will still face challenges. Buddhism never promised a life without pain. It offered a life without unnecessary suffering, suffering created by resistance, by denial, by self-abandonment. When you stay loyal to yourself, pain may still visit, but it no longer controls you. It moves through awareness instead of lodging in the heart. Remember this clearly. You do not need permission to choose yourself. You do not need approval to protect your peace. You do not need validation to honor your truth. The Buddha taught that liberation begins when you stop running outward for answers and start listening inward with honesty and patience. Everything you are seeking outside is already forming quietly within you. Let this be the moment you stop fighting yourself. Let this be the moment you stop rushing your becoming. Let this be the moment you stand gently, firmly, and compassionately on your own side. Choosing yourself is not the end of love. It is the beginning of living without fear. It is not separation. It is awakening. Stay present, stay honest, stay with yourself. That is the path.